This week, we're looking at the humanities as a right to democratic citizenship and the need for educating citizens with a full approach that includes the arts and humanities. And thinking of this as an underlying component to citizens' rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We will explore the growth-based model, look at fear and primitive shame as a resistance to democratic societies, encourage pedagogies for democracies, and look at teaching democracy within education. So thinking about this idea of the growth-based model, Nussbaum argues that the goal for democratic nations goes beyond economic growth, but rather that citizenship in a democracy is about something more. This citizenship includes a protection of political and civil rights, but also a right to education through state constitutions. We're challenged to ask what education is for. Is it for economic growth or for a citizenship and a citizen's rights? This paradigm encourages the arts and humanities within a model of education that's the growth-based model, a model that advocates that democratic citizenship considers the whole person in rights, dignity, health, political participation, and education. Let's look at what counters this model in democracy. So Nussbaum discusses this idea of fear and primitive shame that comes up in individuals within a society. The humanities have not only been placed across a sort of in opposite of economic growth, with technology as this sort of one road to economic growth, but they've also come to be feared. There's essentially a fear of art and humanities in particular, especially for students within universities that are studying arts and humanities, that these studies won't lead to a job. Nussbaum names that the arts and humanities are feared as an incorporation into general education systems from secondary education through high school and college. Fear, in fact, leads to an increasing dependence on domination within society. A counter to this fear is found to be the basic respect for every person's dignity. So we're really trying to encourage that part of citizenship within democracy is acknowledging every person's dignity. Fear and primitive shame, Nussbaum argues, are often led and shaped by an individual's experience and reflection of larger social structures. Shame becomes a defense against the individual's perceived world. It shapes the way an individual sees the other, and it shapes how an individual may apply compassion to the other. We come to this need for education as a way to learn not only compassion, but also empathy among individuals on a basic level. Empathy with weakness and empathy for someone who might be unlike ourselves. Nussbaum argues that this idea of primitive shame, which is this fear of the weakness in ourselves as individuals and a perceived weakness or fear of the other, that this primitive shame and narcissism and responding or corresponding compassion are the exact reason we need the humanities and a sort of well-developed education for democracy. Education and literacy are not only a fundamental right to democratic citizenship, but they create a hospitable environment for peer culture. Democratic citizenship is taught and instilled in our pedagogies of everyday education. So we can think about teaching democracy within education systems, and this definitely includes libraries and literacy spaces. Nussbaum argues for the Socratic method, the Socratic argument, and a type of Socratic pedagogy. This approach encourages thinking as not only critical to democracy, but also to understanding and reflecting on the exchange of ideas as a social practice. Socratic thinking is done through critical thinking skills, writing reflective papers on learning, and real-world questions are debated within a classroom environment. A Socratic thinking pedagogy encourages an active, critical, curious citizenship that is capable of ultimately resisting authority and peer pressure. In conclusion, we're thinking about the underlying foundations as to why we need to incorporate the humanities into education. We're reflecting on citizenship, society, and individuals, and the philosophical underpinnings of why we believe democracy is improved by education, literacy, and these philosophical approaches to an educated citizenship. Including a healthy education in democratic citizenship can help the individual build empathy with this idea of the other or an individual who's not themselves within their society. This pedagogy resists narcissism. It resists this idea of primitive shame through empathy, and it decreases the fear of the other and ultimately leads to a healthier democratic society. So, how might we apply these principles to the library setting and to our own approach to humanities librarianship? What would it look like to encourage a Socratic pedagogy model in the library, a model that encourages critical thinking skills and debate? How is healthy democratic citizenship encouraged by the library? How is the library shaped by healthy democratic citizenship? And what are some real-world library models that encourage the Socratic pedagogy?